A locked filing cabinet sits in a basement for 40 years. Untouched. Inside it, names. Dozens of them. Children who walked through the front doors of a school that looked, from the outside, like every other school in town. Brick walls. A flagpole. A bell that rang on time every morning. But behind one particular door, a door with no window, no number, nothing to mark it, something else was happening. Something the teachers never spoke of in the staff room. Something the parents were never told at pickup time. For years, children vanished into that room and came out changed, quieter, thinner, afraid of sound. Nobody asked why. Nobody was allowed to ask why. Because in this institution, silence wasn't just expected, it was enforced. Drilled into every student like a second curriculum. What went on behind that door stayed buried for decades, until one woman, now in her 60s, finally broke 40 years of silence and told investigators the truth. What she described didn't just shock a courtroom, it rewrote what an entire community believed about the safest place they thought they knew. This is the story of a school that hid something unimaginable, and the people who almost took it to their graves. To understand how this happened, you have to understand the era it happened in. Mid-20th century, a time when institutions, schools, homes, and asylums operated with almost no outside oversight. Inspectors visited once a year, sometimes less, and always after weeks of advance notice. Whatever happened inside those walls stayed inside those walls, recorded only in ledgers the staff themselves controlled. This particular school was praised publicly. Local newspapers printed photographs of smiling students on graduation day. Officials called it a model institution, a place other schools were told to imitate, a name parents proudly repeated at dinner tables across the region. But behind the polished reputation, a second set of rules governed daily life. Rules no parent ever read, no student ever agreed to, and no outsider ever saw written down. Staff kept two versions of every record, one for inspectors, one for themselves. Punishments were logged in code. Certain rooms were left off the building's official floor plan entirely, as if they simply didn't exist, as if the architects themselves had agreed to forget them. Former groundskeepers later admitted they were told never to enter the East Wing after dark, and never, under any circumstance, to ask what the sounds were. Students who complained were labeled troubled. Students who told parents were called liars and disciplined for it. And parents who pressed too hard were quietly discouraged from visiting at all, told the school needed space to work. The deeper you dig into the paperwork, the stranger the pattern becomes. Expulsions with no explanation, transfers with no destination, and one line, repeated in the records year after year, that investigators still can't fully explain. Sent for correction. Sent for correction. 3 words that meant a child would disappear from class for days, sometimes weeks, and return unable to explain where they'd been. Survivors, decades later, finally gave those words a definition. They described a system of punishment hidden entirely from public view. Isolation rooms, with no windows, physical discipline that went far beyond anything the school's official handbook described, and staff members who operated less like educators and more like wardens. One former student, now a grandmother, recalled being locked in a storage closet for nearly 3 days over a minor infraction, fed once, spoken to never, counting cracks in the ceiling to stay sane. Another described watching younger children disciplined in ways designed specifically so the marks wouldn't show, so a doctor glancing over a shoulder would see nothing worth reporting. And then comes the moment that redefines everything. Buried in a box of donated school records, a researcher found a private ledger, not the official one shown to inspectors, listing dozens of corrections per month, cross-referenced with a second column labeled simply outcome. Some entries in that column were blank. Some said resolved. A handful said nothing an outsider could interpret without a chill running down their spine. Medical staff, when they existed at all, were often instructed to record injuries as accidental, regardless of what they actually witnessed, regardless of what a child tried desperately to explain. Complaints filed with local authorities were returned to the school itself for internal review, meaning the people accused were the same people investigating themselves. For years, this closed loop protected the institution completely, absorbing every warning sign before it could ever reach a courtroom, a newspaper, or a worried parent. Every red flag any outsider might have noticed was quietly folded back into the system before it ever saw daylight. The truth wasn't hidden by accident. It was hidden by design, engineered layer by layer by the very people paid to protect the children inside. When survivors finally came forward, decades after leaving those halls, the reaction wasn't immediate justice. It was denial. The institution had long since changed hands, changed names, buried its own history under new administration that claimed to know nothing of what came before. Officials called the allegations impossible to verify. Records had been destroyed, misplaced, or simply never existed in any form investigators could subpoena. But survivors kept talking. One testimony led to another. A journalist connected names across 3 decades of alumni who had never met each other, yet described the exact same rooms, the exact same phrases, the exact same fear settling into their voices decades later. Eventually, enough evidence surfaced to force a formal inquiry. Some former staff faced questioning under oath. Few faced real consequences. Many had died, retired, or simply disappeared into anonymous retirement long before anyone came looking for them. For the survivors, justice arrived incomplete, an apology issued generations too late, a settlement that could never undo what childhood was quietly stolen from them. But their courage did something the legal system couldn't. It forced institutions everywhere to confront how easily unsupervised power over children can curdle into abuse when nobody is watching and nobody is asking the hard questions. Today, this case is cited in child protection training precisely because of how long it went unnoticed and how ordinary the school looked from the outside the entire time it was happening. That's the part that should unsettle you most. It wasn't hidden in some remote, sinister building at the edge of town. It looked exactly like the school down your street, with the same brick walls, the same bell, the same smiling photographs. And that is exactly why nobody thought to look closer. History doesn't only live in ruins and battlefields. Sometimes it lives behind an ordinary classroom door, protected not by walls, but by silence, by respectability, by the simple assumption that surely nothing so terrible could happen somewhere so familiar. This story isn't really about one school. It's about what happens whenever power goes unchecked, whenever institutions are trusted simply because they look respectable on the outside, and whenever children are told, directly or by silence, that their voice doesn't matter. The real horror was never the building itself. It was how long everyone else looked away, how many small warning signs were explained away, because the alternative was too uncomfortable to face. So here's the question worth sitting with tonight. How many ordinary places are hiding something right now, simply because no one has thought to ask the right question at the right moment? Tell me in the comments what part of this story shook you the most. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, not buried, subscribe, because history only stays hidden if we let it.